The Bilderberg Group. Dr. Joseph H. Retinger, who died in 1960, economist, political philosopher, Communist Poland's chargé d'affaires, and a major proponent of a united Europe, along with Prince Bernhard, of LippeBiesterfeld, of the Netherlands, Colin Gubbins, former director of the British SU, Special Operations Executive, and General Walter Bedell Smith, former American ambassador to Moscow, and director of the CIA, who said when he took over the CIA, "We can't lick world communism, no counterinsurgency plans will work. We must compromise and coexist with communism." He later became an Undersecretary of State in the Eisenhower Administration, joined together in 1954 to organize this secret group, created under the direction of Alastair Buchan, son of Lord Tweedsmuir, and chairman of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Its governing council was made up of Robert Ellsworth, Lazard Frere, John Loudon, N. M. Rothschild, Paul Nitze, Schroeder Bank, C. L. Sulzberger, New York Times, Stansfield Turner, who later became CIA Director, Peter Calvocourcy, Penguin Books, Andrew Schoenberg, RIIA, Daniel Ellsberg, and Henry Kissinger. Bernhard said, "It is difficult to re-educate the people who have been brought up on nationalism to the idea of relinquishing part of their sovereignty to a supranational body. Lord Rothschild and Lawrence Rockefeller hand-picked 100 of the world's elite, and they have a heavy cross-membership with the Council on Foreign Relations, which they control, the English-speaking Union, the Pilgrim Society, the Round Table, and the Trilateral Commission. Their purpose was to regionalize Europe, according to Giovanni Agnelli, the head of Fiat, who said, 'European integration is our goal, and where the politicians have failed, we industrialists hope to succeed.'" In Alden Hatch's biography of Bernhard, he stated that the Bilderberg Group gave birth to the European Community, now the European Union. Their ultimate goal is to have a one-world government. Their first meeting was held at the Hotel de Bilderberg, hence the name of the group, even though they have referred to themselves as the Alliance, in Oosterbeek, Holland, from May 29 to 31, in 1954. Charles Douglas Jackson, Vice President of Time magazine, delegate to the United Nations, Special Assistant to the President, and later publisher of Life magazine, spokesman for the American delegation, led by David Rockefeller, promised those present, whether he, Senator Joseph McCarthy, dies by an assassin's bullet, or is eliminated in the normal American way of getting rid of boils on the body politic, I prophesy that by the time we hold our next meeting, he will be gone from the American scene. McCarthy was the crusading senator who revealed that communists had infiltrated high-level posts within the U.S. government. He didn't die until 1957. The Bilderbergers hold annual meetings in locations all over the world. In Europe, the Rothschild have hosted some of the meetings, while the meetings in 1962 and 1973, in Saltsjöbaden, Sweden, were hosted by the Wallenbergs, who had an estimated fortune of $10 billion. The meetings were chaired by the German-born Prince Bernhard, the husband of Queen Juliana of the Netherlands, said to be the richest woman in the world, because of her partnership with Baron Victor Rothschild and the Royal Dutch Shell Oil Company, owning 5% of the stock, which in 1978 was worth $425 million, and also holds stock in Exxon, until he was forced to resign in August 1976, because of his involvement in the Lockheed aircraft bribery scandal, and his extramarital affairs. Bernhard wrote, "Here comes our greatest difficulty. For the governments of the free nations are elected by the people, and if they do something the people don't like, they are thrown out. It is difficult to re-educate the people who have been brought up on nationalism to the idea of relinquishing part of their sovereignty to a supranational body. Walter Scheel of Germany took over as chairman, and then it was Britain's Lord Carrington, who is on the board of the Hambros Bank. There are about 120 participants that are invited to the Bilderberg meetings, of whom about 2/3 come from Europe and the rest are from North America, and about 1/3 are from government and politics, and the other 2/3 are from the fields of finance, industry, labor, education, communications. The meetings are closed to the public and the press, although a brief press conference is usually held at the conclusion of each meeting, to reveal, in general terms, some of the topics which were discussed. The resort areas and hotels where they meet are cleared of residents and visitors, and surrounded by soldiers, armed guards, the Secret Service, state and local police. All conference and meeting rooms are scanned for bugging devices before every single meeting. Among those who have attended their meetings, Owen Lattimore, CFR, former Director of Planning and Coordination for the State Department, Winston Lord, CFR, Clinton's Assistant Secretary of State, Allen Dulles, CIA, Senator J. William Fulbright, from Arkansas, a Rhodes Scholar, Dean Acheson, Secretary of State under Truman, Gabriel Hauge, Assistant to President Eisenhower, who according to the Wall Street Journal, helped teach Ike what to think, and later became chairman of Manufacturers Hanover Trust Company, George Ball, CFR, Johnson's Under-Secretary of State from 1961-66, and foreign policy consultant to Nixon. Philip Jessup, representative to the International Court. Henry A. Kissinger, chairman, Kissinger Associates. David Rockefeller, member, J.P. Morgan International Council. Nelson Rockefeller, Lawrence Rockefeller, Dean Rusk, Kennedy's Secretary of State and former president of the Rockefeller Foundation. Gerald Ford. Henry J. Heinz II, chairman of the H. J. Heinz Company. Senator Henry M. Jackson, Senator Jacob J. Javits, N.Y., Prince Philip of Great Britain, Lord Louis Mountbatten, Dennis Healey, former British Defence Minister. Manlio Ambrosio, Secretary of NATO. Wilfred S. Baumgartner, Bank of France. Guido Carli, Bank of Italy. Thomas L. Hughes, President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Robert S. McNamara, Kennedy's Secretary of Defense and former President of the World Bank. Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of England. Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, President of France. Harold Wilson, Prime Minister of England. Edward Heath, Prime Minister of England. William P. Bundy, former President of the Ford Foundation, and editor of the CFR's Foreign Affairs Journal. John J. McCloy, former President of the Chase Manhattan Bank. Christian Herter, Secretary of State under Eisenhower. Lester Pearson, former Prime Minister of Canada. Shepard Stone, Director of International Affairs for the Ford Foundation. Dirk Sticker, Secretary General of NATO. Gardner Cowles, Editor-in-Chief and Publisher of Look magazine. Paul G. Hoffman, of the Ford Foundation, U.S., Chief of Foreign Aid, and Head of the UN Special Fund. Donald H. Rumsfeld, President Ford's and George W. Bush's Secretary of Defense. Father Theodore M. Hesburgh, former President of Notre Dame University. Helmut Schmidt, Chancellor of West Germany. George F. Kennan, former U.S. Ambassador to the Soviet Union. Paul H. Nitze, Robert O. Anderson, Chairman of Atlantic Richfield Company and Head of the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies. Donald S. MacDonald, Canadian Minister of National Defense. Prince Claus of the Netherlands. Marcus Wallenberg, Chairman of Stockholm's and Ida Bank. Nuri M. Burjai, Turkish Ambassador to NATO. Bill Moyers, journalist. William F. Buckley, Editor of National Review. John D. Rockefeller IV, Governor of West Virginia, now U.S. Senator. Cyrus Vance, Secretary of State under Carter. Representative Donald F. Fraser, Representative Peter Frelinghuysen, Representative Henry S. Roos, Representative Donald W. Regal, Senator Adlai Stevenson III, Senator Charles Mathias, M.D., Lieutenant General John W. Vogt, former Director of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Eugene Black, former President of the World Bank. Joseph Johnson, President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Hannes Androsk, Austrian Minister of Finance. David J. MacDonald, President of the United Steelworkers Union. Paul Van Zeeland, Prime Minister of Belgium. Pierre Common, Secretary of the French Socialist Party. Imbriani Longo, Director General of the Banco Nazionale del Lavoro in Italy. Vicomte d'Avignon, Belgian Minister of Foreign Affairs. Walter Leisler Cape, Member of the German Parliament. Ole Merville, Member of Norway's Parliament. Krister Wickman, former Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Governor of the Bank of Sweden. Senator Walter Mondale, M.N., later Vice President under Carter. Representative Thomas S. Foley, former Speaker of the House. Henry Ford III, Head of the Ford Motor Company. General Walter Bedell Smith, General Andrew J. Goodpaster, former Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, and later Superintendent of the West Point Academy. Zbigniew Brzezinski, General Alexander Haig, European NATO Commander, former assistant to Kissinger, later became Secretary of State under Reagan. Alan Greenspan, Chairman, Federal Reserve System. C. Douglas Dillon, Secretary of Treasury in the Kennedy and Johnson administrations. From Dillon, Reed, and Co., Baron Edmund de Rothschild. Pierce Paul Schweitzer, Managing Director of the UN's International Monetary Fund. Paul B. Finney, Editor of Fortune magazine. James Rockefeller, Chairman, First National City Bank. Giovanni Agnelli, Chairman of Fiat in Italy. Otto Wolf von Ammerongen, German industrialist. Theo Sommer, German newspaper columnist. Arthur Taylor, former Chairman of CBS TV. Neil Norland, Editor-in-Chief of Berlingske Tidende in Denmark, and Senator Lloyd Bentsen, TX, Chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, candidate for Vice President in 1988 with Michael Dukakis, and now the Secretary of Treasury under Bill Clinton. Although this list is a bit tedious to go through, you have probably started to see how the same names keep showing up over and over. Bilderberg policy is carried out by a 35-member Bilderberg steering committee, including an inner circle known as an advisory committee, which is said to be made up of Giovanni Agnelli, Italy, David Rockefeller, U.S., Eric Roll, Great Britain, and Otto Wolf von Ammerongen, Germany. Some of the steering committee members are Henry Kissinger, Jessica T. Matthews, President, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, James D. Wolfenson, President, World Bank, Marie-José Kravis, Senior Fellow, Hudson Institute, and Jorma Ollila, Chairman of the Board and CEO of Nokia Corporation. All American members of the steering committee are members of the CFR. A few of the Bilderberg permanent U.S. members are George W. Ball, Gabriel Hauge, Richard C. Holbrook, Winston Lord, Bill Moyers, and Paul Wolfowitz. The permanent Bilderberg Secretariat is located at 1 Smidswater, The Hague, the Netherlands, though another address is sometimes reported at 2301 de Leiden, in the Netherlands. Their address in America was at 345 East 46th Street, in New York City, which was also the location of the Trilateral Commission, and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. The American Friends of Bilderbergs, with offices at 477 Madison Avenue, 6th floor, in New York City, is an IRS-approved charitable organization that received regular contributions from the likes of Exxon, Arco, and IBM, while their meetings are funded by the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and the Carnegie Endowment Fund. The Goals 2000 program, developed during the presidency of George Bush to revamp the nation's public school system, was born at the April 1970 Bilderberger meeting in Bad Ragaz, Switzerland. The purpose of the new educational philosophy was the subordination of national ambitions to the idea of the international community. Because our schools are too nationalistic, children, in the future, will be indoctrinated to consider themselves world citizens. Prior to the 1971 meeting in Woodstock, Virginia, Prince Bernhard said that the subject of the meeting was the change in the world role of the United States. After the weekend conference, Kissinger was sent to Red China to open up trade relations, and an international monetary crisis developed, which prompted the devaluing of the dollar by 8.57%, which made a tremendous profit for those who converted to the European currency. In 1976, 15 representatives from the Soviet Union attended the meeting, which was held in the Arizona desert, and it was believed that at that time, the plans were formulated for the breakup of communism in the Soviet Union. At the 1978 meeting, they predicted that a depression would hit the world in 1979, and that the dollar would die. Their solution was to replace the dollar with an international Bancor system, international banknote, of currency that would be universally acceptable as a medium of exchange. The Bancor system would have the international gold reserve deposited in a neutral country. It is an offshoot of the same Keynesian system developed at Bretton Woods in 1944 from the idea by German economist Julius Wolff in 1892. This system would protect the Illuminati when they spring their trap, and the world economy would crumble. At their 1990 meeting at Glen Cove, Long Island in New York, they decided that taxes had to be raised to pay more towards the debt owed to the international bankers. And George Bush, who pledged during the campaign, "Read my lips, no new taxes," found himself signing one of the biggest tax increases in history on November 15, 1990, a move which was a contributing factor to his defeat when he ran for re-election. At their 1991 meeting at the Black Forest Resort in Baden-Baden, Germany, they discussed plans for a common European currency, and European central banking, and reviewed Middle Eastern events and developments in the Soviet Union. David Rockefeller said during the meeting, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during these years. But, the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries." Then Governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, a Rhodes Scholar, who attended Oxford University in England, was invited to speak, and a decision was made to endorse his candidacy, according to Jim Tucker, a Spotlight reporter, who had a source within the group, codenamed Pipeline and Opos. No wonder Clinton was able to survive all the media attacks regarding his personal life and lack of experience. One of his top money men was investor and international banker Jackson Stevens, who also donated $100,000 to the Bush campaign. His wife was the co-chairwoman of the National Bush for President organization in 1988. Also in attendance were Michael Boskin, chairman of Bush's Council of Economic Advisers, who was a speaker, Nicholas Brady, U.S. Treasury Secretary, and Vice President Dan Quayle, who impressed the group enough that there was talk of supporting him for the Republican nomination in 1996. In fact, after the meeting, Bilderberger member Katharine Graham, head of the Washington Post, published a series of positive articles on Quayle. At their 1992 meeting, the group discussed the possibility of conditioning the public to accept the idea of a UN army that could, by force, impose its will on the internal affairs of any nation. Henry Kissinger, who attended the meeting, said, "Today, Americans would be outraged if UN forces entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. The official press release for their 2002 conference said, Bilderberg's only activity is its annual conference. At the meetings, no resolutions are proposed, no votes taken, and no policy statements issued. They are just a small, flexible, informal and off-the-record international forum in which different viewpoints can be expressed and mutual understanding enhanced. However, Phyllis Schlafly wrote in A Choice Not an Echo, that the Bilderbergers are a little clique of powerful men who meet secretly and plan events that appear to just happen.